Hi YouTube, Fiona Corwin. Tonight I want to talk to you about sex. Sex is a wonderful thing, and for those of us who enjoy having it, we like to have as much of it as we can. There are, of course, those who do not enjoy having sex, never even want to think about having sex, and for them, that too is enjoyment. Not really my experience, so I have to speak from what I know. So what I will tell you is that as a trans woman, certainly for this trans woman, sex can be complicated. You have to start from the place of you're in transition, and the people that you're with are in transition. Oftentimes, early in transition, that is a particularly uncomfortable thing. So it's awkward, right? When you're still having sex and you don't identify as the gender that you were handed at birth, then you have to figure out what kind of roles kind of exist for you now in the sexual universe. That's further complicated by the idea that you're still figuring out how to have sex with yourself, right? How do you figure out how to have sex with somebody else? How do you find somebody who's going to be coachable, who's going to listen, who's going to care enough to spend the time to get it right? Maybe, like me, you have managed to transition with the partner that you started transition with. If you have, I salute you. It is not an easy process, and I know that personally. If you haven't, understand that at some point you will find the opportunity, if you want it, to have sex. If you are younger than 18, you should log out now. I want to talk about sex as a trans woman. I started transition um, about 4 years ago, and at that point in my life, I'd like to have sex, but for the longest time, I couldn't orgasm without imagining myself as the woman in the deal. And that provided me some privilege, right? Like, so I could hold out for a very long time, so long as I didn't flip that switch in my head to being me, right? So I guess what I want to say about that is that when I came to transition, it was a it was it was a heady time, and I was finally being me, and so sex usually began and ended very quickly, simply because I was thrilled to just be me. Um, because I happened to be married to a woman, I took care to make sure that she was satisfied first, and that way things got handled. Um, for that first year, that's kind of how things went. I found myself being somewhat more submissive. I kind of wanted to lay back and let her take the driver's seat, and that's just how things were. I had the ability uh, to have intercourse if I wanted to, and sometimes that's exactly how I wanted to have sex. Um, but generally, it was from a fairly submissive kind of place. As time went on, I began to find some facility, at least with topping, if I needed to, and that provided me a little more access. That fairly quickly, though, faded into some uncertainty about where I would have to go mentally to get to where I needed to be to achieve orgasm. I mention that because for me, and I imagine for most women, and possibly everyone, sex really is mostly between my ears. I have very little control over over my physicality, other than that I can exert with my mind. I think that as time went on, I became less and less able to orgasm on demand. Some of that was related to dysphoria, some of that was related to hormonal changes, some of that was related to just too much noise in my head. I was I want to share with you that I was emotionally immature. It was a bit of a surprise at 40 years old to be dropped into the hormonal soup of a teenage girl, and I was not prepared. Um, so God help anybody who had to deal with me through that. It was it was fun. I'll tell you what. I think that part went on for a long time, probably 3 years. For those 3 years, I was on 300 milligrams of spironolactone and 1.5 milligrams of estrase taken orally daily. I also had a milligram of finasteride on top of that, and even at that, my blood levels of testosterone were running about 400 micrograms, which, for those of you who are not chemists, that's essentially the low end of the range for biological men. Um, Still, even at those levels, I did manage to maintain an 600 to 800 micrograms serum level for estrogen, and that produced some results. So below the nipple line, I lost pretty much all coarse hair that I had, and that I do have now is very fine. I noticed softening of my skin. I noticed some breast development, and I noticed just this incredible sensation that my breasts and my nipples had. That was, as it turns out, part of the growth process. It hurts, as it turns out, for those of you who are curious, and it hurts for quite a while. Probably hurts for that first 18 months, and then from there on, anytime they start growing. I so for those first 3 years, I was on oral medication. About 9, 10 months ago, I started on injectable estrogen and injectable Depo-Provera, and continued the spironolactone. The results medically were very dramatic. I dropped from 400 micrograms in my blood system to basically undetectable amounts of testosterone in my system. I can tell you that the sensation was heady. It was very much like I was feeling right, and that was what I've been looking for. I also, when I added the Depo-Provera, I did it because I had read that Depo-Provera changes the breast, causes the breast to be in a more mature state. And I guess by that what I mean is the ducts in the breast, where the milk is formed and stored, expand, and they call that lobular growth. The result of that is that the breast rounds out, and I, like many trans women, had pointy boobs. Um, they are now quite round. My nipples got darker, specifically my areola got darker and spread out. The nipple itself grew both wider and prouder, and I'm very pleased with that portion of development. My skin continued to soften. The body hair that I had um, is even finer and more gone at this point. Um, this had happened a bit prior to the injectables, but nowhere near like it has after the injectables. My genital features have shrunken, and I mean all of them. My testes, my scrotum, my penis, all of them are mere shadows of what they once were, and I think that's pretty funny. I suppose if I could clap my hands and have them gone tomorrow, I would. Also different, a year ago I would have told you that I needed the boob job more than I needed the SRS, and at this point I'm pretty happy with the boobs the way they are. Wouldn't mind if they'd be bigger, but the SRS is really what matters to me the most right now. Have not had sex with my wife or anyone else for that matter other than myself in several months now. Some of that is simply because um, things have changed dramatically and very, very quickly for me. Over the past 9 months, I've gained 40 pounds, and and most of that has been in my butt. I had hoped to gain some more womanly figure, and I do have that now. So dealing with that has been more interesting. I've had to buy clothes and do do get annoyed on the regular with clothes that do not fit that I like. But that's pretty normal, and I'll take it. Uh, so, sex. I had to give up masturbating in a male type way. It had just ceased to work mentally, it had ceased to work physically. And so I went out and purchased a vibrator, and that was not easy to deal with. It took me a while to get the right technique, and once I did, oh my God, right? Uh, Orgasms change when you're on HRT. And when you start HRT, you notice that your orgasms end up being longer. They end up being not quite so intense as a male orgasm. Male orgasms tend to be very explosive, very genital focused, very sort of pow, and they just go. The orgasm that starts to happen through HRT is a more gradual thing. It creeps up and it washes over you. Took me literally from my head to my toes, tingling. It was amazing. And from 15 seconds to perhaps 35 or 40 seconds. The results after liquid are amazing. At this point, I can come probably as long as I want to, and I'm going to tell you that I probably don't want to for more than a couple of minutes. It gets very intense and it's exhausting, but it's amazing. That's been good. Some of the reason I have not had sex with my wife is simply because I don't know how to communicate what I need. I know that I know what I want, how I want it, but I don't know how to get that across. So in her case, she's attracted to me, but she has got her own issues around her own physical um, pain, her own physical shape and size, and that's on her side. The other thing I can tell you about sex as a trans person is that it often opens doors that you may have cracked open. You know, things like anal, things like maybe sex with the opposite gender, maybe sex with um, someone of mixed or transgender. Some things that you may have thought about get thrown wide open. And that is both exciting and bewildering in many cases. You find that your attraction may shift a bit, although I suspect it doesn't so much shift as you become more accepting of it as you get closer and closer to who you are. I, for example, was about 20%, 80% uh, when it came to men versus women. Nowadays, it's probably closer to 50-50 in terms of what I would be interested in. And trans people are hot. That's all I got to say about it. I'm not fetishizing. We are beautiful people. Uh, so I guess, you know, you gotta deal with who you are. And doing that in transition is difficult. I encourage you to realize that people with you are transitioning with you and to be gentle with them. You can't have it just the way you want it all the time because, damn it, that's the way I want it. You have to be gentle, um, especially if you want them to stick around. Uh, I suppose that's what I have. Remember, life is beautiful. Every moment precious. Hug the ones you love. Tell them that you love them. Kiss those babies. And call your mom. She misses you. Thanks.